was a real shock to hear that some of the violations of human rights have been carried out by organisations that are wanting to do things in the name of climate justice. Do you think there's going to be room to take that to COP, to really make that clear that in the name of changing and trying to fight climate, trying to work for climate change, that human rights are not violated at the same time? Because that is very shocking that that's happening. Do you think COP will listen to what you're so brilliantly saying?
That is actually one of the requests that we wanted to put forward with this film, because a lot of people think that all these so-called sort of renewable energy sort of approaches are the way forward, in terms of the solution to the climate change. But they are not really understanding that behind that, I'm not saying that always, but sometimes, and it seems to be quite recurrent, that there are human rights violations. So I don't think we are the only ones advocating for that. I think there's a whole movement behind the importance of incorporating human rights in any climate change or environmental sort of policies. I think the UN Human Rights Council very recently has actually passed a resolution precisely emphasizing that the right to have a safe environment and clean environment is a human right. So I definitely think that is a really, really important point. And I'm just going to say something a little bit conflictive, but I think it's an interesting idea. When we're going to screen this film at a city firm next week, Simmons & Simmons is a partner of PBI, and they've done a lot of pro bono work with us. When they saw the film, they said, we don't really understand this, maybe we should remove it from the film because it's confusing. And then we said, well, we do understand the confusion, but we think precisely because there is confusion, it's important to bring it, and we're going to keep it in the film. I don't think they had bad intentions. They were genuinely not fully knowing, the depth behind this conflict that sort of is going on. So we think it's a really important one, and we'll definitely try our best, to raise it.
I've been sitting and watching films that express, this what's happening on the land, whether it's in Latin America or Africa or Asia, for decades. And, these companies, some of them are held to account, some of this is taken to boardrooms, but, this isn't new, is it? We're just maybe trying to find a new way of challenging what's going on because we're in the middle of a climate emergency, but, 50 years war on want, the 1970s and all those other, European or national, organisations. And, we go on. So I just wonder, what can we do? What do you do to impress on these multinational companies? We heard, a Norwegian company was involved in this work, and, generally, us Europeans think, they're doing something quite good in Norway about, climate actions, but this is just unacceptable. But it's been unacceptable for so long. So anyway, that's just my one reaction.
Yeah. Okay. On the issue of companies, I mean, I've been working for Peace Brigades International and human rights for nearly 25 years, and I cannot tell you the amount of reports and meetings and films and all of that you are saying that I have watched. And so a part of me is feeling like, what is the purpose of all of that if still the violations are going on? Why those violations are going on? Because the power balance is not there. You have the communities, struggling with big powers, whether it's companies, whether it's the states acting in collusion with companies. So, okay, we could think there is nothing to do, give up, our efforts. No. I'm saying that, but sometimes I feel like that. But what I feel is that you need to approach the issue of companies from the perspective of the corporations. That's partly why we have been working with the legal community, with corporate lawyers for quite some time, because we think it's important to understand the thinking of not just a corporate lawyer, but how corporations sort of look at issues. So my view is that with corporations, you need to think of what is more harmful for them. is there a reputation that perhaps needs to be exposed, in order for them to feel there is a problem here, Is it their clients' sort of base of consumers that perhaps need to be made more aware of issues? Is it legislation that needs to be passed in order for them to carry out, mandatory due diligence? And there are some efforts going on at the moment, particularly with the European Commission on that. Some legislation is about to be passed. So there are things that can be done. But the thing is that, the imbalance is huge, yeah? And, we as Peace Brigades, what we are trying is to keep those defenders safe, so they can continue with the work. Because our understanding is that they have the understanding, the knowledge, and they should be the ones building and developing the strategies, but they need to be protected, they need to be enabled, yeah? Otherwise this is not going to happen. But I also know, and I have learned from many of these interviews and from my own experience with PBI, that they cannot just do it by themselves. We also need to support them. And I don't mean to be patronizing. What I mean is if they need to understand, say a company, is it Canadian, is it British, is it Norwegian? Sometimes it's not easy to find that out, They are struggling to understand and identify. So, we are also putting them in touch with the legal community, making sure that experts in the north can actually, transfer knowledge and understanding. So I think there are things that we need to do, but I do believe that we need to be strategic in the way that we do those things, because the same strategies are no longer working. Advocacy and dialogue is not enough. You have to think of how best can you harm or, threaten or expose, the violations of those corporations, and think of a strategy. And I think there are things that can be done. You could freeze their assets, yeah? You could file complaints. There are things that can be done, and we might need lawyers at times, yeah? But we also might need people from Extinction Rebellion taking actions, because the whole defamation, the whole reputational aspect, it can actually be done by groups of people voicing the fact that this is unacceptable by this and that company. Yeah? So, I don't know if that gives you any...
No, I totally agree with what you've said, and that's been going on, and it's important. I don't disagree with anything you've said, and it's good that, but the struggle continues, so finding new ways.
Can I just come in to add to that as well? I think that we've got all these international trade agreements that actually, and we've got corporate courts where they can take states and governments to court to sort of say, well, you can't put that green policy in place that infringes on our rights to make profit, and we have to take back that control. And I think, protesting organisations that I suppose champion people in the global south, but also expose companies and divestment organisations and so on. These are ways where we're raising our awareness. We're also recognising that what might have started off as it's something that affects us, we realise that it goes on in the Amazon, it goes on in Honduras, it affects us equally, and we have a historical obligation to champion those people out there, so putting pressure on our government now that COP's here about the international trade agreements, about those corporate courts, global debt. I think these are all really important things for us to make our voices heard on.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that fantastic film, and it feels really, I feel we're quite privileged that we've had the premiere of this film here in Lewes, and that you've gone and talked to those people and created that record to show to us. And I'm thinking, well, what is the next part of the cycle? Because it feels important that we know that these secret things are being revealed. But what can we do, all of us here now, to help those people? Because that's what I was feeling. We need to help them. And you mentioned some, direct action through Extinction Rebellion, maybe using some of this information. Are there other ways that people here can just help those people to carry on that struggle?
So I can mention, for example, PBI jointly with Amnesty International, we have sort of produced an open sort of letter that is going to be presented to the UK government, with very specific requests regarding, how is the UK government going to protect and support environmental defenders, specifically in the context of the COP26 negotiations, because it's easy to say yes, they need to be supported, but how specifically, is funding going to be channeled, is legal support going to be given, is sort of advice regarding how they can confront corporate abuse, is issues around accountability for those corporates sort of responsible for violations. So we can share that letter with you individually and with the group. I think you could, at the back of that letter, you could easily write a letter to your own MP and say, in your own words, in your own particular way, saying that this is unacceptable. You think that the UK government should at least protect human rights defenders. You can give examples. You can make reference to the lives of these individuals if you feel that's the best way, and we can provide you with more details. I think that's a very specific way, and I think it would be good to do that before the COP negotiations, because we want the representatives to go to that forum with a message, and it could be things that have been highlighted about, the renewable energies, the importance of not overtaking and overseeing the human rights element behind that. It could be about, what else can be done to stop corporate abuse. The UK government should also listen to the citizens, and the thing is, we work a lot with embassies on the ground. We're constantly asking them for support, diplomatic support. They visit communities, they do a lot. I have to be honest with you. But what often happens is ambassadors have other conflicts of interest because they have economic portfolios as well that they have to address, So sometimes we are talking of a project in Honduras that is supported financially through corporates by the UK business community, and yet you have those communities needing the support of the UK government in terms of the protection, and it's not an easy one to resolve, especially when they are being criminalized and so on. So I think the more pressure we can put as individuals, the more we can show them that we are informed about what are the details of what is happening on the ground, because I think the details are not always so obvious to everyone, and what we wanted here is to offer you a bit of detail, and I know sometimes it can be too much, but I was speaking to friends of Marta before, about the fact that it's rare that you hear the voices of the communities, and that's precisely what we wanted. They cannot be there. We are not always going to be their representatives. I think their voices need to be heard, and so you can sort of echo those voices through some of this letter writing. I'm not saying that letter writing is the solution, but I'm saying it's at least something we can do prior to COP. I mean, we do have the names of the companies that each of these defenders are sort of fighting against, and we can maybe share that with you. Not all of them are based in the UK, which means that it might be less direct, the route and the connection, but we can maybe offer that information if that is helpful. And then, as I mentioned before, and maybe there are lawyers in the room, maybe not, but we are also developing a new project called the Legal Empowerment Project. And this is precisely to link up the legal community in the UK with grassroots defenders, because we have done focal discussions with defenders in different parts of the world, and they have highlighted where they feel they need to understand better the legal aspects behind corporate. So if any of you are lawyers, you can also be part of those of that project, which would involve online webinars and workshops and capacity building initiatives for defenders.
Because this is a relatively affluent part of the world, compared with over there. Is there any way that people can contribute money that makes a difference?
I see. Well, I mean, the financial aspect, if you want to directly support some of these defenders, I mean, I think if you want to create like a collect or something, and then we can maybe find a way to offer that, I would be very happy to help you with that, if I'm honest with you. I think that would be amazing. No one thinks of those things generally. We only want information from them, we want knowledge, we want understanding, but not necessarily put ourselves in the shoes of some of those communities who actually need money as well. So if you feel like raising a little bit of money that perhaps can be channeled towards them, I'm very happy to liaise with Marta, which is obviously my trusted person, and your trusted person, if you like, and then we can find a way to make that money available, if that is what you feel.
I suppose I was wondering whether there'd be any interest here of saying, that we as a town would like to sort of ally ourselves with a particular community, whether anyone would be interested in that, and then in a sense whether they would feel that was supportive, and whether there are ways that we could help them both with our solidarity, but also, I suppose, sending them money. Would that
I think
would
that would
make
be
a
very
difference?
nice. I mean, you know, I'm happy for us to come up with some kind of idea, and then I'll be happy to be available to sort of think that through. I mean, all those different people are not necessarily working together, so we will have to find a way. You have to decide what you want, and I'll be very happy to help you in terms of connecting you with the defenders and find a way that the money can get to them. Because I think that would be an amazing idea. But let's maybe have a separate discussion about that online or whatever you think is the best way.
Thank you. Just to follow that, in terms of keeping in contact, if anybody's interested with that, there's sign up sheets to be in contact with Peace Brigades International, to be in contact with the XR Climate Justice Group, and there is a little to make comments. There's a book on the table over there if you want to leave any comments, and a little donation basket. We haven't worked out how we're going to do that yet. I think you had a question.
I think you've covered really what I was going to bring up, really, and that is about holding governments to account. You know, we're talking about obviously supporting the defenders, but I mean, in the climate we've got at the moment, with aid being cut to countries, you know, what are globally, what are governments doing? How are they being held to account? Because they're supporting some of these obviously multinational companies in doing this, you know, to the degree we've just seen on the screen with the military and the police conniving with them. And I think, you know, I'm quite interested in coming at it from the top end as well, because I think unless you tackle that, it's never going to go away.
You say so well.
I think there is an additional problem to that, and it's the fact that sometimes companies are so powerful, are even more powerful than states, and they are themselves suing states. You know, this is linked to trade agreements. So it's like if they have made commitments, and then in a way, you know, companies are saying you have to commit to that, you know, to states, and if you don't, then you're going to be sued. So there is an additional layer of complication. It's almost like states. I'm not saying the states are willing, but sometimes they are. But I think sometimes corporates have more power than states. So, I mean, you know, part of this legal sort of advice that we are receiving comes from understanding, you know, the complexities of this. So, in some instances you have to lobby states, but I think sometimes the states are really having their hands tied, because there are other powerful forces against them.
And if I could come in there as well, so the 100 largest economic entities in the world today are 69 corporations, only 31 are actual countries or states. So that gives you a perspective on how these multinationals have, you know, so much power over governments as well. But the UN is trying to come up with a treaty that actually says they can't do some of the gross, huge, you know, humanitarian atrocities that they have been committing, and they shouldn't be able to hold governments to ransom in that sort of way, because they do. So let's hope that UN binding treaty works. So we could also be somehow trying to perhaps put our voices and our actions behind something like that as well. Because you're right, everyone needs to be held to account, but it's money that talks.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for the film. And what came across to me most strongly, and what I enjoyed so much from that film, was a sense of voice, that I was hearing the people speaking. And so often the narratives that we get of people in those kinds of political and economic situations are channeled to us through filmmakers in the West, through the media, etc., etc. And it seems to me that what's really important is that we are empowering them. We can become over-concerned, and we can try to take on their struggle for them, which isn't the right thing to do. So we need to find ways in which we can magnify their voice and give them more of a platform to speak and to make their case, and at the same time to try and find the judicial leverages, like for example ecocide laws that they can then use to fight the kind of judicial battles that they need to fight to win their rights. But it was, I thought it was, I wanted to thank you for the film because it was very refreshing.
Okay, well, thank you again to Manu and Susie, and to Marta, who is also involved with the production. That was beautiful. So, if I could ask you before you leave, just to put your chairs back in rows, because we've got another showing, that would be fantastic. And thank you for coming.